Every ounce of gold matters for Parker Schnabel this season, and his crew is feeling the pressure. With time slipping away, they are pushing the wash plants to their limits, determined to keep production running at full capacity. At the heart of this relentless operation is Damian Brown, who has been leading the charge at Sulphur Creek. But just as things seem to be back on track, a major equipment failure threatens to bring everything to a grinding halt. A race against time. For 3 straight days, Damian and his crew had been working tirelessly, running the wash plant non-stop in the hopes of hitting a big gold haul before the week's end. The ground was moving faster than expected, and Damian was confident that if they could just keep going, the results would speak for themselves. Meanwhile, operator Jacob McClure kept the plant fed while Damian, operating the only excavator on site, loaded paid dirt for the crew to haul. The operation was running smoothly, and spirits were high. Jacob was especially relieved to see the wash plant working again, knowing that the gold-rich ground at Sulphur Creek could be a game-changer for the season. But as always in gold mining, smooth operations never last for long. Heavy rains had soaked the ground, turning the haul roads into mud pits. The crew struggled to keep up as their haul trucks skidded and slid through the thick sludge. One of the trucks, burdened by the weight of the paid dirt, suddenly sank deep into the mud. The driver fought to free it, but the truck wouldn't budge. Seeing the situation unfold, Damian grabbed his radio and called for assistance. The only way out was to tow the truck free, so he carefully maneuvered his excavator into position and attempted to pull it loose. After a tense struggle, the truck finally lurched forward, but not without serious consequences. Inspecting his equipment afterward, Damian discovered a large crack in the top plate of his excavator's bucket. The damage was worse than expected. He could slide a knife right through the gap. If they continued using the bucket, it could tear off completely, rendering the excavator useless. The reality of the situation set in. They had no choice but to shut down the excavator, a decision that could cost them valuable hours, if not days. Damian knew Parker wouldn't be happy. Every minute of lost production meant lost gold, and there was no room for failure this late in the season. It was just after 4 a.m., and the crew had no time to waste. Damian knew that a replacement bucket had to be found immediately. With no other option, he set off on a 25-mile drive to Parker's Dominion Creek laydown yard, hoping to find the right part. Arriving at the yard, he was met with rows upon rows of old buckets, each weathered by years of mining. He scanned the equipment, uncertain which one would be the right fit for the 480 excavator. With no room for error, he had to make a quick decision. Trusting his instincts, he selected the most promising bucket and loaded it up for the return trip. Back at Sulphur Creek, the crew was waiting anxiously as Damian arrived with the replacement. The tension was high as they worked quickly to install it, knowing that any delay could put their entire operation at risk. If the bucket didn't fit, it would mean another long trip back to Dominion Creek, time they simply didn't have. With the bucket in place, the moment of truth arrived. After a few careful adjustments, it locked in perfectly. Relief washed over the team as they realized they could get back to work without missing a full day of mining. Jacob couldn't hide his appreciation for Damian's quick thinking. Thanks to his determination, they had managed to avoid a costly shutdown. By morning, the operation was back in full swing, with paid dirt once again flowing through the wash plant. Damian, exhausted but satisfied, knew that their efforts had paid off. Keeping the plant running was all that really mattered, and thanks to his fast action, Sulphur Creek was still in the game. The season wasn't over yet, but at least for now, Parker's operation had dodged another disaster. Despite the challenges, the crew successfully processes paid dirt, recovering 110.03 ounces from Big Red, 132.00 ounces from Roxanne, and 176.02 ounces from Bob, for a total worth over $440,000. With this haul, Schnabel's season total climbs to 4,593.90 ounces, surpassing the halfway mark of his adjusted 8,000-ounce goal. Time is running out for Parker Schnabel, and this season has been nothing short of a grueling battle. From equipment failures to ground that hasn't delivered as expected, the young miner has been fighting an uphill battle. But despite the setbacks, one thing is keeping his operation afloat: record-high gold prices. While the gold market is working in his favor, Parker knows he can't rely on high prices alone. If he wants to hit his season goal, he needs more gold in the sluice. That means keeping all 3 of his wash plants running. Unfortunately, things haven't gone as smoothly as planned. To keep the operation alive, Parker shifted his focus. If Dominion wasn't going to deliver the gold he needed, he had to find it somewhere else, and fast. With time slipping away, Parker made a bold move. He invested $2.5 million into pre-stripped ground at Sulphur Creek, banking on the fact that it could provide a quick 1,000-ounce haul. Sulphur Creek seemed like the perfect solution: ground that had already been stripped, a plant ready to run, and pay dirt that should be rich enough to meet his needs. It was a high-stakes gamble, but if it paid off, it could turn his season around. At first, Sulphur Creek delivered. The plant, Bob, processed nearly 400 ounces of gold. But then, trouble struck. Bob had to be shut down for 2 weeks while the crew stockpiled more pay dirt. The plant is a 230-yard-an-hour beast, meaning it chews through material at an astonishing rate. Keeping it fed is no easy task, especially with a limited crew. Bob hasn't been able to stay running, Parker explains. Mainly because it's a hungry plant. But once we get the pay pile stacked back up, we can fire it up again and get running. The pressure is on Damon Brown. With Sulphur Creek's potential still untapped, Parker is putting a lot of faith in Damon Brown, the plant boss at Sulphur Creek. If the site is going to hit Parker's 1,000-ounce goal, Damon has to keep Bob running for the remainder of the season. How are things going? Parker asks, checking in on the situation. Pretty good, Damon replies. We have a hoe operator and 2 truck drivers, but the crew is already spread thin. That plant is very hungry. If we can keep the pay pile built up, we might be able to keep it going. Parker nods. Yeah, we just need to keep a wash plant running. It's that simple. But just as things seem to be getting back on track, another problem emerges, one that could shut Bob down for good. With everything in place to restart Bob, Damon heads down to the pump to check the water supply. That's when he notices something alarming: the water flowing into the system is full of waste and debris. It turns out that the previous claim owners had used the pond as a dumping site, filling it with trash and contaminants. The intake pond is now completely unusable, and without clean water, Bob can't run. The frustration is evident on Parker's face. This isn't just a minor inconvenience, this is yet another delay in a season that has already thrown one challenge after another at him. Showing ingenuity, Brown builds a makeshift dam with trees, successfully restoring water flow and reducing downtime. It's a small victory, but an important one. With Bob back in action, Parker's team can finally focus on what matters most: getting gold in the sluice. The season isn't over yet, but Parker knows the clock is ticking. If he wants to hit his target, there's no room for error. With his wash plants running, gold prices soaring, and his crew doing everything they can to keep up, Parker's fate is still hanging in the balance. But if one thing is certain, it's that he won't go down without a fight.